Chicago, Illinois, a city born from movement, a place shaped, sustained, and continually renewed by migrants. From its earliest days, Chicago's story has been written by people who arrived from elsewhere, carrying moments, traditions, languages, and dreams. Migration isn't a chapter of Chicago's history. Migration is Chicago. Yet today, the same forces that built this country are cast as threats to it. The people who give cities their rhythm are framed as dangers to their stability. This tension between who we are and who we fear lies at the center of our story. And so we begin with a question. What are stories for? Remembering. They are the foundation of humanity carried across borders, across oceans, across generations. Stories protect our memory. They resist erasure. They remind us what is real and when lies become loud. But today in America, the immigration story has been rewritten by those who benefit from distortion. And the people living these stories must fight not only to survive, but to be remembered truthfully.
This is becoming a regular protest action where people are trying to block the vans holding people who have been apprehended by ICE.
Kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today. It must stop right now.
But is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it, and it's a very tough thing to do.
Racial supremacy depends on forgetting. Forgetting shared humanity, forgetting shared history, shared origins. It thrives by convincing its followers that they are greater than thou, not through truth but through ignorance, by stripping people of their real stories and replacing them with villainizing myths. Supremacist ideology creates a world in which fear feels logical and cruelty seems deserved. This narrative doesn't just live in the dark corners of American society, it now echoes in the halls of power across our nation. Today's political rhetoric points immigrants as rapists, murderers, violent extremists, drains on our economy, destroyers of culture. And these labels weren't chosen by accident. They serve a purpose: to turn the immigrant into the other, the outsider, the threat. This narrative is the bedrock of a strategy. Make the nation forget its own story. Make people believe the newcomers are the enemies, and make cruelty appear necessary. So before we go further, we must name the engine powering this worldview: zero-sum thinking, the belief that if one group gains, another one loses. Zero-sum logic reduces these complex realities into a competition for survival. It turns neighbors into adversaries. It frames resources as fixed and empathy as extremely dangerous. Historically, zero-sum thinking has fueled conflicts across the globe. I mean, we see it fueling today with India and Pakistan, occupied Palestine and Palestine. It thrives on fear and simplifies political failures into moral panics. And in the United States, zero-sum thinking frames migration as this threat with one assumption: that there is not enough. There's not enough jobs, not enough housing, not enough safety, not enough America. But the truth is not so simple. Under zero-sum logic, immigrants become the perfect scapegoat. When the economy struggles, blame the migrant. When crime is sensationalized, blame the illegal. When political leaders fail, blame the outsider who cannot defend themselves without risking deportation. Zero-sum logic makes people believe their suffering was caused by someone with even less, and that is the tragedy and the design.
No. Instead, you must be on guard. In fact, you must be vigilant that these people are going to try something in a panic, despair, the likes of which we've never seen, because they know that their time is running out. They know the American people are ascendant and that their time will soon come on November 5th. So what does that mean? And you could smell it in the air. You could smell the panic. You can smell the desperation. You could smell the disgust.
And to further, the political weaponization of zero-sum thinking is not subtle. It's actually quite strategic. In a polarized nation like America, many Americans believe that the opposing party is not only misguided, but also incredibly dangerous. This is not by accident. Politicians and commentators benefit from keeping people so divided, fearful, and outraged. Fear is incredibly profitable. Division is useful.
So this is an ice processing center in the Chicago suburbs, which we've been told is like one of the central nodes of operation, I guess, for increased ice activity in the city. Immigration crackdown that has already ensnared hundreds of thousands of people. And now he's threatening to deploy more military troops into democratic cities. After the murder of Charlie Kirk, Trump is targeting the so-called radical left, a move many fear is really an assault on free speech.
No tax on Social Security, largest deportation effort ever, drill baby drill, gas prices low, restoration of the Constitution, Supreme Court justices we can trust, and end to the lawfare. Those 10 things you tell every swing voter you know in this state, and you commit to them.
No. 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 Nope. Nope.
At rallies, the crowd is told, America's running out of resources. Young people are depressed because of the failure of the political class. Housing costs are rising because the country is being invaded. The nation is becoming a land of renters because of bad policy, bad leaders, and bad outsiders. And always, the blame is directed towards migrants. Not corporations, not deregulation, not failed government planning, not decades of economic inequality, just migrants. This scapegoating is politically effective because it transforms national problems into very interpersonal ones. It directs people's anger downward instead of upward. And with that anger mobilized, politicians justify sweeping, brutal policies, including promises of the largest deportation effort ever. In September 2025, the consequences of zero-sum thinking manifested in full force. Operation Midway Blitz, a nationwide immigration enforcement initiative, became one of the most aggressive crackdowns in American history. Despite official claims that ICE was only targeting murderers, rapists, gang members, criminals, evidence showed a very different reality. Raids targeted people with no criminal history, workers leaving job sites, parents picking up children, green card holders. Even US citizens have been detained for the sound of their voice and the color of their skin. Chicago became a battleground. So did across the United States. Federal agents used tear gas, pepper balls, and unmarked vans. A White House social media post implied that Chicago was about to find out why it's called the Department of War. State officials called it a virtual act of war against the American people. But the crackdown didn't just stop with immigrants. It expanded to anyone who dared to defend them. Lawyers faced threats to their loan forgiveness programs, students had visas revoked for writing op-eds, journalists were surveilled, and advocates were followed home. Some people were sent to the brutal detention center in El Salvador based on unchallengeable allegations, including the interpretation of tattoos. Under zero-sum ideology, not only are immigrants criminalized, solidarity becomes criminalized too. And while government enforces zero-sum logic, literature reveals what it destroys. Jenny Erpenbeck's Go Went Gone offers a piercing counter-narrative. The novel follows Richard, a retired professor whose quiet life is interrupted by a group of African refugees on a hunger strike in Alexanderplatz. Richard sees what others overlook. Amid the noise of the city, the refugees' silence is immense. As he visits shelters, he finds young men forced into perpetual waiting and sleeping. becoming old long before their time. Bureaucracy strips them of agency, policies break them slowly, without spectacle. A bus pass becomes a lifeline. A train fare mistake becomes grounds for deportation, an iron law. Stories become currency and burden. Richard comes to recognize that beneath differences in language, skin, and origin, the differences between people are ridiculously small. He sees that the frontline society imagines between citizen and migrant, native and foreigner, are artificial. The real divide is between systems that deny humanity and people struggling to hold on to it. Richard's own research reveals the cold architecture of zero-sum thinking. Dublin II, a law that allows European countries to avoid hearing refugees' stories by sending them back to the first EU country that they entered from. This means refugees who survive war, loss, and ocean crossings are sent to countries overwhelmed by arrivals and starved of resources. Many face poco lavoro, little work, no future. The law treats humans' lives as administrative burdens. Richard learns that asylum fraud is often nothing more than telling a true story in a place where no one is legally obligated to listen. Awad, a Ghanaian who grew up in Libya, explains, "When war destroys your home, your family, your life, you become foreign everywhere. And when you are foreign, you have no choices." These truths reshape Richard's perspective. His journey is imperfect, naive at times, savioristic even, but he changes because he listens, and listening he learns is a radical act.
My name is Andrea Spicer. I'm 61 years old. I was born in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada, and I came to the United States in 1985.
My name is Xavier Thompson. I am 24 now. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and I came over here, I want to say 2019.
It was all on sort of a adventure level, and I had been to Chicago, visited with a friend, and she was part of a Christian ministry in kind of a rough neighborhood in Chicago. So I thought, that'd be cool. I'd like to do that. I'll go move in. It's a community, hundreds of people living together, kind of hippie commune feel. And so I thought that would be really fun. I'll come for a year. That was basically what it was all about, an adventure.
I think first one is going to be education. It's not a simple answer. I don't think any of these questions will be simple. But primary motivator was education. In my home country in Jamaica, at least our public school system, it is rather demanding. We have a ton of classes. There's something like 24 classes in a year. So the second reason is opportunity.
For sure.
Literally advertised as the land of opportunity, which is ironic seeing how things have kind of fallen into place now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my migrations, you come from Canada.
Yeah.
I'm a white person. English is my first language coming from Canada. I'm pretty much set for a successful immigration story, right? The only hurdles are just the reality of having to take part in the bureaucracy and system of, immigration.
Yeah.
It's called then, now it's Homeland Security. But with all of that, the paperwork, doing all of that, but back in the 80s, it was just so much easier than it is now. It was way less expensive. The truth is, I came in, I didn't have the proper kind of visa. I ended up overstaying my tourist. You can stay for 6 months. I'd been here for years. I ended up getting married. I had no fiance visa. And then the next time I went back to Canada after I was married and tried to come back into the States, that was a hurdle because I didn't do the proper paperwork.
Right.
Even then, and I'm going to say one more time, this time it's 1987. It's a whole different world. And I basically got reamed out by the customs official. Was telling me I wasn't going to be allowed back in the country, and then he said, well, you can, but go to immigration as soon as you get home and stamp my passport.
Yeah.
And then at one point I had a resident alien card, like every 10 years you have to renew it. and I have applied to renew it. It got lost in the mail. And so all of that, and it got to a point where it's like, I don't want to have to keep paying every 10 years for a new thing. I don't want to have to deal with this paperwork stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to get my citizenship.
I think my story's a little bit non-traditional because I had previously traveled to the United States before, multiple times before moving for school. And I think that my exposure to travel was really, really good. My mom did a fantastic job at getting me adjusted to it and normalizing it. So there's the issue with identity. Who am I and where do I belong and why do I belong? And then there are the actual legal hurdles. While illegal entry and overstaying your visa or, working illegally is not actually a felony. It's usually classified with as a misdemeanor, so it's like a fine. It's in the same category as littering. So while the punishment before it wasn't that big, you want to do it in the way that invests into your long term. So H-1B visas, applying for your green card through your employer, yada yada yada. And one of the best ways to do that is to already have a background in the United States. So having a degree, whether it be high school or your bachelor's in the United States, it's a very convenient way to kind of slide in.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing because Canada and the United States really share a ton culturally, but there are just differences. And one of the things about Trump and what he stands for and who he's speaking for, I think that kind of ties in this world of this American way of violence that I think is different in Canada. Just when I think of the gun control law, so I think of death penalty, those kind of things that are really different in Canada. And it's a slight difference, but there is, we have socialized medicine. There's a little more socialism edge to things where the government provides more for you in the country. So for me, that's that kind of idea of that generosity that and it's not perfect at all, but is available in Canada, and here feels this scarcity we're going to tamp down, and it has that rootedness in violence to me, that people can be killed, we can kill each other in this country, you don't need to be cared for, your basic needs aren't that important. And I just think that, I don't know, just that way of being a Trump, the way he messages that just speaks to a larger cultural reality here.
For sure.
Terribly. I am a doer, and I am both highly empathetic, and I choose to believe that I'm a pretty emotional person in general. So, being here during his first presidency and being like, wow, I got the shit end of the stick, got really unlucky, got the one president of the United States history at the time that was fiercely anti-immigrant because, the United States identity is built off of being a melting pot, having a nice conglomerate of different cultures and cultural identities in one place. It's a really admirable and advantageous trait. I really hope he doesn't. Hey, Baba. Yeah. So when I came, having the least immigrant-friendly person wasn't good, and then second presidency, he's actually done a lot more. In his first presidency, he didn't get shit done, but now he's throwing the National Guard around. Right. He's defunded a bunch of different departments, and then funneled a bunch of that funding into ICE, or partially as well to pay off the money owed from tax breaks to the ultra wealthy. So feeling like every time I go outside and the administration would identify me as public enemy number one. I'm an educated immigrant taking people's jobs.
Well, Donald Trump would no longer be the president for sure. gosh, I think it's so beyond just this administration. I think it's spread so much deeper, and it's just like feeding these chasms in the country. So I'm like, I think we're into like next generations possibly before there could be some coming back from where we are now. But I think that, I don't even know how this works politically, but this idea that you could just throw around these executive orders where people can now operate in these ways of terrorizing communities, rescinding basic rights to so many women's health options. So I think that there's so many of those quasi-legal things that have gone on. I think somehow can we put a halt to that?
I mean, it sounds so medieval and so counter to my own moral view, and I champion myself as a lethal pacifist. Some of them, unfortunately, must die because, for example, like with Trump, he has a cult personality and a cult following, and you know, the really diehard supporters, they are either so uneducated or so far gone that, you know, even if he stepped back on the rhetoric, the damage has already been done.
I think that there's this like there's so much common ground in this country, like for real, and I think that's the same for all humanity, right? Like everybody wants to have a place where they can have a roof over their head and a decent life and enjoy raising their family in whatever version that looks like for you, right? And everybody's not, and I understand it's not going to be all equal, whatever, but if everyone could just have access to some ease and ability to be educated and to, I don't know, to be able to live a life and have enough food and roof over your head. I mean, just the basic. And there's enough money in this country to make that happen. It's somehow the level of greed, which and I believe that if I had $1 million or whatever, it'd be tough for me to be all like, I want to share it, you know? Maybe that, But I'm just saying the level of greed and individualism in the country, it's like, man, somehow we could pull back from that, and I don't know how that works. I really don't. But I think there's so much common ground, and that Americans, we want a lot of the same things.
For sure.
I actually have a lot to be proud of. I think that in terms of our government, man, we're terrible. We're just as corrupt, if not more. But in terms of our people, like, we can be polarized about politics, but we are a friendly folk. And we're funny, and we're really, really warm, not just to each other, but to tourists. I think that Jamaicans, you know, I don't want to make broad statements of like, oh, this country's people are this way, or this country's people are that way, because that's just not right. But I will say that there's a cultural identity of both conformity and non-conformity. There's a dynamic existence between polar opposites that coexist. You know, we have the most bars per capita and the most churches. We have some browbeating Christians who will ostracize you for being homosexual, and then we also have a ton of closeted homosexuals. But with that too, there's a degree of tolerance, especially amongst younger Jamaicans, that I really appreciate, especially being here now, where I'm like, man, like, I remember being in Jamaica during election season, and like, there's a ton of political violence, but your average person, you could have a conversation with them, and it's like, it's funny how worked up people will get, and it's never that serious. Most people are not going to be like, oh, you're a Republican? I hope, yeah, we'll never speak again. Versus here, unfortunately, just due to circumstance and environment, things are crazy. Yeah, we're cool.
So this is where it's tough because I haven't lived there for so long. So I hope I'm not just like having some nostalgic moment of like, oh, this, and Canada's not even about that. I think one thing I'm really proud about Canada is, even though it gets messy and It's not done perfectly. There is a high level of acceptance and invitation and welcome for immigrants in the country. And also the socialized, even though it's not that great, but it's better, socialized medicine and government support and the safety net that's available. I think that's something about the country that is really, and there's a level of like live and let live there that I think, and it's not rooted in a very super individualistic way of being, but it is a little bit like, it's okay, I can let you be you over there. And I think that's a deeper thing that's in the culture that I really appreciate.
For a long time, I've always just been like, I'm going to do what's best for my family. And I've never really thought about what's good for me. But I've been working on that. And I can't say I really want to make a difference.
Yeah.
I want to make a difference in a tangible, concrete way. Especially in regards to medicine. I think that that's one thing that like it really frustrates me, is that how inaccessible medicine and treatment and, you know, preemptive care as opposed to reactive care is across the globe, and especially in the United States. I've had a couple of experiences in my home country and here where I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to try and make this issue better. Or like I want to try and put people in a better position because it's terrible.
Overall, zero-sum logic insists that there isn't enough to go around. But the data and the stories tell a very different truth. Immigrants strengthen economies. Immigrants lower crime rates. Immigrants revitalize neighborhoods. Immigrants support local businesses and create new ones. Chicago's own data shows the profound economic contributions of immigrants across industries. Sanctuary policies, contrary to political fear-mongering, correlate with lower crime and higher economic stability. But beyond data, there is something more powerful here. The lived experiences of people who came here seeking safety, dignity, and opportunity. In interviews, migrants share stories of fleeing violence, building new families, working impossible hours. Their narratives destroy the zero-sum myth because they reveal abundance, of resilience, of creativity, of humanity. They remind us that suffering is not a competition, and safety is not a finite resource. So, at the end of Going Gone, Richard hosts several refugees for dinner. In this simple act, the barriers between them collapse. Richard shares his own sorrow, of loss, of aging, of loneliness, and Khalil responds with a metaphor. Richard says, "The things I can endure are only the surface of what I possibly can't endure." Khalil asks, "Like the surface of the sea?" Richard pauses. "Yes, exactly like that." When we turn to page 210, it says, when taking all these possible borders into consideration, it seems to Richard that the difference between one person and another is in fact ridiculously small. Perhaps on this level of the universe, there's no such thing as difference. There are no two halves. It's just a matter of a few pigments in the material that's known as skin, in all the languages of the world. Meaning that the violence on display here is not at all the harbinger of a storm in the center of a universe, but is in fact due merely to an absurd misunderstanding that has been dividing humankind and preventing it from realizing how enormously long the lifespan of a planet is compared to the life and breath of any one human being. In this moment, Richard recognizes something profound. Human suffering has no nationality. Human resilience has no citizenship, and human connection has no border. So we return back to our first question. What are stories for? Stories are for remembering. Remembering who we are as individuals, remembering who we are as a nation, remembering the humanity that zero-sum thinking tries to erase. Stories protect us from forgetting the truth, that the differences between us are small, that the borders dividing us are manufactured, that the scarcity we fear is a myth. Have people forgotten in Berlin of all places that a border isn't just measured by an opponent's stature, but in fact creates him? Stories remind us that there is enough. There's enough space, enough opportunity, and enough compassion for us all. Stories resist erasure, defy propaganda, and rebuild what fear tries to tear apart. And so we tell them, and we listen, and we remember.